This is the 7th video on the build, second video covering painting. I'm still just coating the actual base from the primer finish to the first base finish. In the previous video I explained about the raw basic importance and raw basic advice about airbrushing and the model that I'm actually using, and yeah, in future I will be covering an entire video on the method and the way that how I airbrush. I suppose this would just be a bit of a teaser. Also, I've got an extractor booth on hand to extract the fumes out of my work area outside. I've got a long tube going underneath my desk to the door behind me. I believe in my tour of the workshop I show how this is set up. Some of these paint fumes can be harmful to your lungs and whatnot, and it's very unpleasant to breathe in, so a basic extractor booth, if not a gas particle mask or a fine particle mask, is essential when you're doing this hobby. You don't want to be waking up when you're 45 years old with some unusual lung cancer or lung disease, you know. That would just be shit. So yeah, when hobbies start involving chemicals and dangerous procedures, you have to look into the health and safety aspect as you look at the health and safety aspect when you study or when you work. Your health's always a priority. Lots of detail on ridges parts. You have to attack this at a lot of angles, or otherwise certain parts or certain details will mask other areas, so I have to actually spray this at many different directions. It is a bit of a pain in the ass, but like I said before, airbrushing is amazingly fun. It actually kind of almost looks like a small air gun that you use in automotives. If you actually have a close look at this design, it's meant to be in the shape of a flamethrower. It's Citadel being cute for their Warhammer or Wargaming games. Very overpriced, but some of their tools are nice. The reason why I still use them as an old Warhammer guy. I'm doing very light coats, that's why I'm doing one straight on top of the other. As soon as it hits it, it sort of dries to some degree, so that's pretty cool. And once it's all sprayed on, you switch your extractor booth off straight away to stop attracting dust to sit on your work. Maybe the mix how I do it, the things are quite dry, so that's pretty cool. Now my bottle's full of paint and thinner. When it's wet, Windex is the way to fix it. Fill that bastard up with Windex, close it, shake her around, add a little water and airbrush it out. Only problem with airbrushing is there is an amazing amount of maintenance required to keep the internals nice and clean. The second reason why I like this really basic design, because you can strip it in 2 seconds and put it straight under the tap. The conventional airbrush, you actually have to pull apart the whole assembly, and there's a long, very fine needle in the middle of it, and once you damage the tip of that fine needle, it's up to shitter. You need to buy a new needle, and that can be quite an expensive sport just for colouring something in. When I do get around to learning how to do detailing stuff, I will use my airbrush just for effects and detailing, and I'll use this bulky beast for colouring still. I suppose that's how my style is, and if you guys like it, it's cool. The nozzle adjusts how much paint or liquid can flow through the brush. I normally have it quite thin so I can finally layer the paint on. And when I'm cleaning it, I open it up to be quite large so I can rush as much liquid through the internals as I can. And once it's all stripped out, as you can see now, and the crappy liquid inside, I strip the assembly as is in my hand, and I take those pieces to my sink and give it a little rinse out. Now remember, if you any paint sloshes out and hit the surface, clean that off immediately, because your loved one or your parents is going to tear you and your asshole. So yeah, look out for the family when you do this hobby. You know, you don't want to have little paint streaks all over the bathroom sink. So yeah, it's cleaning out the little paint nozzle, the little container. I think I'm removing a bit of paint right there, so that's a good example. The needle and the nozzle. That's the nozzle, and the next one's the needle. And wash up, of course. After the brief tour of my bathroom, this is the finished result. There's little wet patches. I don't know where the hell that came from, but yeah, it dried quite nicely. This is the next colour I'm using from the Tamiya acrylic range. And the bastard's jammed, so I'm using my trusty wrench. I'm going to be painting my scaffold, my boom arm for the boom lift, and the catwalk. Now, I forgot to explain how I actually built the boom arms. The one that came with the Kotobukiya kit was shit. All I did was got 2 sheets of I-beam looking styrene, drilled a hole through it, put a little styrene rod in there as a pivot point so it can open and close, detailed a bit with some fine strips, and jammed the end to where the original boom arm was meant to begin, and glued the boom arm to the other end where the joint is. So I've got maximum movement and an actual real god to life boom arm, how boom lifts are meant to be. I actually work around boom lifts at work, so I've got a bit of an insight on that side of things. You have to admit, unless you got something that's only 3 meters high, the Kotobukiya one is shit. Painting the boom arm right now of this very nice grey colour. I think it's either NATO grey or German grey, not sure. With the catwalk, the boom arm and the scaffold, I just painted this one colour and detailed it later. Didn't really receive any other coats except for a couple of clear coats and a wash, and they were easily finished. The actual detailing of the base is a different story, which you'll see me hand paint later. Problem with painting this bust is it's multi-layered, there's lots of holes and little areas, so I have to spin this thing and paint it every single known direction so there wouldn't be one gap that's unpainted, and inspect it later on and fill in any areas that has been unpainted by hand. I just dropped it because the clip didn't work too well, and I think I'm going to be painting on my very own fingers, or I'm going to lean it on something. That actually was a pretty bad situation, but it was resolved somehow. I think I had to clean back a few parts. That's the basic finished product so far, and now I'm painting the Bazooka. The actual Bazooka finish is a very similar colour to the styrene, so you may not notice it actually changed colour, which is quite funny, but when you're looking at it quite close to where I was, you do notice yeah, the colour's changing. It's not quite that primer grit anymore, or gritty surface. It's starting to become more of a smoother, sleeker Zaku weapon. Now that also gets treatments of a wash and a few coats of clear coat. Nice as. Those little Tamiya paint bases are pretty awesome. This is the box of the actual boom. It's so small I didn't even bother airbrushing it. Hand painting. At this stage the airbrush is put down for the meantime, and I'm going to be hand painting a lot of the detail and smaller areas, including those tiny little figures. And once that's done, I chuck on the flat coat and the clear coats for extra protection. I've got a range of brushes, and brush care and brush application of paint is very, very important. You need to look after your brushes, or otherwise you're never going to get the paint to apply how you want it to.